Welcome to A Teacher Explains. I'm a teacher, and in this video, I'm going to explain how we understand media. Now, have you ever stopped to think if the media is just showing you reality or if it's actually shaping it? For a long time, the big question was all about the direct effects of media. But today, we're going to dig into a much more interesting idea: how we, the audience, are constantly building the meaning of the world from the media we consume every single day. So, for the longest time, media research asked this one pretty simple question: what do media do to people? The whole assumption was that we were just, passive sponges, soaking up whatever was on the screen. But that view is just so limited. Why? Because it completely leaves out the most crucial element: us. It totally overlooks the active thinking role we play every single time we watch or read or listen. And this is where the whole game changes. The meaning-making model completely flips the script. Instead of asking, what do media do to people, the real question becomes, how do we interpret what the media shows us? The focus shifts away from some simple direct impact to the messy, complicated, and fascinating process of interpretation. And, most importantly, it finally sees the audience not as a passive blob on a couch, but as an active builder of social reality. Okay, so how does all this work? Well, we're going to break it down into four main parts. We'll start by looking at that huge shift from thinking about simple effects to understanding complex meaning. Then we'll get into the actual building blocks, the signs and symbols that media uses. After that, we're going to pull back the curtain on how power and ideology play a massive role in all of this. And finally, we'll focus on the audience's own power to interpret and even resist these messages. All right, let's jump right into our first big idea: making that leap from just thinking about media's impact to really understanding how we interpret the culture around us. At the heart of it all is something we do constantly: meaning making. Just think about it for a second. Meaning isn't just in a TV show or a news report, just sitting there waiting for us to find it. No, it's something we actively build. A scene in a movie isn't just inherently sad. We interpret the music, the lighting, the acting, and we construct that feeling of sadness. You could say media gives us the bricks and mortar, but we are the architects of meaning. So, if we're the architects, what are our tools? What are we building with? Let's get into the nitty-gritty, the fundamental building blocks of all meaning, the signs, symbols, and language that media uses to talk to us. There's a whole academic field for this. It's called semiotics. And I know, it sounds super complex, but really, it's just the study of how signs create meaning. And a sign is literally anything that stands for something else. Think about the golden arches for McDonald's, the thumbs-up like button, or even just a simple red stoplight. Semiotics helps us decode all of it. Turns out every single sign has two parts. First, you have the signifier, which is the physical thing you see or hear, like the letters D, O, G. Then you have the signified, and that's the concept that instantly pops into your head: a furry, four-legged creature that barks. The magic happens in that link between them, a link that only exists because we, as a culture, all agree on it. There's nothing dog-like about the actual letters DOG, right? And this is where meaning gets really, really powerful, because it operates on two levels. Denotation is the simple, literal dictionary definition. A home is a place where one lives. Simple. But connotation, that's all the emotional and cultural baggage that comes along for the ride. Safety, family, warmth, belonging. Media absolutely thrives on connotation. A car commercial isn't just selling you a machine. It's selling the connotation of freedom, of success, of adventure. Now, this brings us to a really critical question. If meaning is built, who gets to be the head architect? Who's drawing up the blueprints? This is where we start to see that meaning-making isn't some neutral, innocent process. It's deeply, deeply connected to power, to politics, and to the dominant ideas in our society. The brilliant cultural theorist Stuart Hall put it perfectly. He argued that media don't just reflect reality like a mirror, they construct it. They are incredibly powerful tools that actively build a specific version of the world for us to see. So what we think of as reality is often a very carefully constructed representation. So how do they pull this off? Well, they've got a whole toolbox. Through representation, they choose what to show and what to leave out. They tap into our cultural myths, like the idea that buying more stuff will make you happy, and they present these ideas as just common sense. This is all part of a broader ideology, which is a system of beliefs that makes one way of seeing the world seem totally normal. And of course, they use stereotypes as a kind of mental shortcut, which often flattens the rich complexity of real people. This leads us to a really important concept from the thinker Antonio Gramsci, hegemony. Now, this is a subtle but incredibly powerful form of control. It isn't about using force. It's about making the dominant group's worldview feel like just common sense. It's about winning our consent so that we accept certain ideas as being natural, as inevitable. And you better believe the media is the main stage where this battle for our consent is fought every day. So if meaning is shaped by these powerful forces, are we just puppets? Are we helpless? Absolutely not. And that brings us to our final and maybe the most important section, our own role as the audience in accepting, negotiating, or even fighting back against the messages we get. A key idea here is polysemy, which is just a fancy way of saying that a single media text can have multiple meanings. The meaning isn't fixed or locked down. A movie scene can be interpreted as heroic by one person and totally tragic by another. Why? Because meaning is created in that space between the text and the audience, and every one of us brings our own unique background, our own experiences to that interaction. Stuart Hall gave us a great map for this called the encoding/decoding model. Here's how it works. Producers encode a message with the meaning they intend for it to have. That message, the text, gets sent out. But, and this is the most critical part, the audience then decodes it. And the way we decode it might be completely different from what the producer ever intended. Communication is never a perfect one-to-one transfer of an idea. Hall actually identified 3 main ways we can decode a message. A dominant reading is when you get the message and accept it, exactly as intended. A negotiated reading is more of a, yeah, but. You generally agree with the big picture, but you tweak parts of it to fit your own life. And then there's the oppositional reading. That's when you see the intended meaning, you understand it perfectly, and you completely reject it. And this really reveals the central tension in all of this. It's a constant balancing act. On one side, we have audience agency. We're active, we can resist, we can create our own content. But on the other side, there are very real structural constraints. Powerful media institutions still have a much louder voice, and they can shape which messages get heard in the first place. Our interpretation is always this dance between our freedom and those constraints. So, what's the big takeaway here? What should you remember? It's that meaning isn't something that's just handed to us. It's something we actively construct every day. Media uses a powerful toolkit to try and influence that construction process, and it's always tied to bigger ideas about power and society. But never forget that we, the audience, are the final crucial players in this complex and fascinating game. And that leaves us with one final thought, something to chew on for today's world. In an age of social media feeds and streaming services, our content is curated by algorithms. So the new question we have to ask is this: how are these invisible algorithms now shaping the very raw materials we use to build our understanding of the world? The concepts we've explored today are built on the foundational work of some brilliant scholars in mass communication theory. That's it for this explanation. Thanks for joining me.